Well, the day is coming to an end, and of course, it's been a truly extraordinary day. In general, we can already start talking about what post-war life in Ukraine will be like. Of course, many things are still, as they say, uncertain. During the talks at the White House today, August 18th, 2025, Trump and European leaders discussed new important security guarantees for Ukraine as part of a still possible, peace agreement with Russia. Here are the main details that have been revealed. The security guarantees similar to Article 5. Both White House officials and European leaders have referred to the Mutual Defense Agreement. Similar to Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which obligates alliance members to consider an attack on any member as an attack on all of them. The goal is to deter future Russian aggression by promising a collective response to any new attack on Ukraine, although Ukraine's outcome remains uncertain. And as for NATO membership, it was said that immediate NATO membership will not be granted. What that means, I can't tell you. In general, it will not be granted, not immediately, not now. Next, the Europeans. They're the first line of defense, now with United States involvement. Trump emphasized that European countries will bear the main responsibility for providing these security guarantees, while the United States will play a supporting role. That is the countries. I don't really like to use the word played, but Trump acted in such a way that the Europeans had to persuade him, let himself be persuaded. It's good when someone persuades you because you can set many conditions. If you do this, fine. Just this once, I'll do that. Trump did not rule out providing United States troops as part of multinational peacekeeping forces, although no firm commitments were made. French President Macron and other European leaders noted that they said it. So, a reliable Ukrainian army, I'm translating from English, backed by security guarantees and long-term international commitments. Again, such long-term is not very clear, so to speak, but still. Well, so to speak, the word never, always, and so on are not present. It will play a role. Such a reliable army will play a key role in deterring further Russian attacks. I would like to add that Europe already sees Ukraine as the country that can provide the most soldiers and the most well-trained army for NATO. And I think that right now, in their minds, let's say, so to speak, for their contributions and so on, etc., Ukraine has been made into mercenaries, participants, but mercenaries of NATO. Some European leaders have called for establishing official binding agreements with Ukraine on military support and operational assistance, even outside of NATO. Well, that's kind of what Putin was proposing. Trump stated that Putin is basically willing to accept certain security guarantees for Ukraine, which indicates a possible readiness for a multilateral approach. I'm not being completely honest. I understand what's meant, but, so to speak, it was said that if this helps to end the war. Multilateral means that many different parties sign an agreement on peace. Deployment of peacekeepers and related details, the exact wording of the agreement and the mechanisms for ensuring compliance still need to be determined in future negotiations. I want to say right away that the devil is in the details, so there's still a lot to do. And during this time, the shooting continues and people are still being killed. I really hope that at least the bombing of residential buildings will stop. In short, although the project is not finished yet, Trump and European leaders are planning framework collective security guarantees for Ukraine, which will likely include multinational commitments for operational and military assistance and the possible deployment of peacekeepers. The United States is open to participating but expects Europe to take the lead. Well, that's what I was telling you, so to speak, yes. The details will depend on the ongoing negotiations with Russia, Russia with Ukraine, or with both Russia and Ukraine. Something unexpected happened during negotiations. Well, Trump and expectations, forget it. With Trump, there will always be something unexpected. Trump said that instead of waiting a long time for an answer, let's just call Vladimir right now, meaning Putin. Yes, there was a certain nervousness among the Europeans, but nevertheless, in the end, they obeyed Trump's orders, so his order was carried out. Putin answered the call. Maybe they agreed in advance that they would call, or maybe not. The main results of the phone conversation between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin on August 18, 2025, they discussed the possibility of organizing direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Putin supported Trump's initiative and expressed his readiness to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, the first time this was mentioned was during the summit, so to speak, in Alaska, and now for the second time. Now, for 4 years, he has been saying that he will not do this. That with this nobody, this unelected, illegitimate person, and so on, he will not meet. In fact, Zelensky responds by saying that he will not meet with a bloodsucker, or with a dwarf who is up to the shoulders or up to the elbows, hands at the edge. Well, so, and now that's how it is. Trump thanked Trump. Putin thanked Trump for the initiative and expressed his readiness. As he said, they agreed to prepare a trilateral meeting. Well, it means Russia, Ukraine, and the United States to discuss key security issues, peaceful settlement, and possibly a territorial exchange. So, a possible territorial exchange, as I understand it, without that, nothing will happen at all. Moscow and Washington will keep diplomatic contact to work on a Ukraine agreement. Well, so to speak, even though we've involved Ukraine, we still understand that the talks here are between Russia and the United States. So what does that mean? Putin expressed his gratitude to Trump several times for the initiative and noted his readiness to engage in dialogue with the United States mediation. And then, so to speak, he casually mentioned the European Union as well. Well, it's not the most important thing, but so to speak. Trump emphasized that the ceasefire
is not mandatory.
It's not required to start negotiations. The main goal is to open a peace dialogue. Thus, the outcome of the conversation was an agreed result about peace. The outcome of the conversation was coordinated steps to prepare for direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine with the participation of the United States and the United States. Of course, they will bring in the Europeans, that is the European Union, as well as intensify diplomatic contacts at the highest level. Well, okay. Trump informed Putin about the progress of negotiations with Zelensky and European leaders, as well as his intention to organize a meeting within 2 weeks, that is quickly, as soon as possible. That means, well, there have already been reactions from several Europeans. They believe that this call was unusual, but a positive step. So a trilateral meeting will be prepared. Key issues will be discussed, like security guarantees and territorial exchanges. And Zelensky? Well, this is very interesting. He expressed his willingness to negotiate with Putin on territorial issues, but at the same time said that Ukraine would not make any territorial concessions. Heh. Trump emphasized that a ceasefire is not a mandatory condition for starting negotiations. So, well, guys, what should we do? Yes, we'll get you to stop now, but then we won't achieve anything else. The main thing for us is to make sure you stop fighting. Thus, the call marked the beginning of preparations for a face-to-face meeting. So, all the leaders, and we'll leave. A significant, meaningful, substantial step toward de-escalation and a peaceful resolution of the conflict. According to Putin's senior aide, Yuri Ushakov, the conversation lasted about 40 minutes. 40 minutes is a long time. It is reported that both leaders agreed to appoint higher-level negotiators. So that's what the conversation was about, raising the level. I thought it was about raising it with Trump, raising the level. For direct negotiations, I mean, back then, Putin used to send the fourth deputy, the fifth minister, So the broader context that Trump keeps trying to introduce is that it's not just a ceasefire, it's peace and so on and so on. He reflects that and it implies significant concessions. The same goes for the Koreans, especially regarding the territories in eastern Donbass. At the same time, President Xi continues to reject the idea of handing them over.
The territories, but
He agrees to meet with Putin about this. European leaders, including, Emmanuel Macron of France, Keir Starmer of the United Kingdom, and others, promptly joined the summit to demonstrate solidarity and emphasize the need for reliable security guarantees for this country. These are their words, not Trump's. European officials are clearly
skeptical, critical.
about Putin's reliability in any peace process, fearing that a weak settlement could provoke further aggression, not only against Ukraine, but also against a number of European Union member states. This is direct interference by Trump. Putin's call during the international summit was perceived as highly unusual and caused a mixed reaction. There were participants who expressed concern about the content and transparency of the negotiations with Russia. Well, great, let's make an agreement and not tell Putin anything. So Zelensky admitted that Moscow proposed to hold negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, and then a trilateral meeting with Putin one-on-one. One-on-one between Zelensky and Putin, and then a trilateral meeting. After the meeting at the White House, he canceled some public events and urgently flew out of Washington. That means he needs to persuade his own people over there. Macron, Maloney, Mert, Starvers, Stuba, Navratsky, von der Leyen, and Ryuter saw the call as a positive step toward a possible peace agreement. They noted that the initiative for a trilateral meeting gives Europe a chance to play a key role in coordinating and guaranteeing Ukraine's security. They amaze me. So the trilateral meeting is Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. Where is the fourth side here? Still, they claim these are official communiques. The trilateral meeting gives Europe a chance to play a key role in coordination. Who are they trying to fool? Probably their own people, I think. So, what exactly did Trump and Putin agree on? After talks with European leaders and Zelensky, Donald Trump called Putin. He called Putin for the second time to discuss raising the level of negotiations between Moscow and Kyiv and preparing a meeting between Zelensky and Putin, focusing on the main issues of conflict resolution and Ukraine's security. Trump said that himself. Well, probably Russia's security too, because why did Russia start the war? To keep NATO away from its borders, right? And now, it's just that NATO is moving right up to the border. It's just called not NATO, but Schmata. There are no specific dates or commitments yet. But as a gesture, Moscow immediately signed a decree allowing ExxonMobil to return to Russian energy projects. I think they were hoping for ExxonMobil to come back. There is consensus that the parties are closer to an agreement.
A deal. However,
Trump openly hinted that Ukraine will most likely have to accept the terms proposed by the Kremlin. Do you understand what kind of knot is being tied here, right? So Zelensky won't take a single step back? At the same time. But I'll come to talk about this. Look, Trump, guys, what's going on with you? Unless you give him a piece of territory, nothing will happen. The Europeans say, thank God we'll help influence the negotiations for you. Great, but there will be 3 parties at the negotiations. So the leaders' reaction is cautiously optimistic, as stated in the communiqué. At the same time, they intend to keep the final say for themselves, these Europeans, when making the final decisions. Well, obviously they're playing to their own audience. Who else would be interested in this? The final word comes from Finland. A personal meeting is expected in the coming weeks, so Putin-Zelensky. Well, basically, gentlemen, yes. The ceasefire remains a contentious issue. European leaders, especially German Chancellor Merz, insisted on stopping the fighting first and then starting talks. Trump, however, reiterated that a ceasefire is not a strictly mandatory condition for reaching an agreement, which, by the way, is more in line with Putin's previous statements.
European officials
stated that any security agreement would require Ukraine to have the ability to arm and defend itself. Well, with the support of both sides of the Atlantic, meaning, of course, our side of the Atlantic. The parties acknowledged that the issue of control over Donbass and other occupied regions remains unresolved and critically important. Trump's Sobchu Putin wants all of Donbass and has suggested that Ukraine officially abandon attempts to regain Crimea or join NATO. Zelensky rejected this position and spoke out against it. That's redundant. I'm not repeating that he also wants to meet and discuss this with Putin. Well, in general, that's Zelensky's position. I still firmly reject territorial concessions and call for a lasting, reliable peace. He needs to go to the country not as someone who betrayed and sold them out, but as someone who says, there's nothing we can do, guys. Let's decide. Let's figure it out together. Of course, no binding agreement was signed about anyone. They talked, and many specific issues remained unresolved. Discussing real borders, mechanisms, security guarantees, and future military roles was postponed until future negotiations. The general consensus was as follows. The leaders support a trilateral meeting for progress. There is broad commitment to security guarantees for Ukraine, and Europe will play a more important role. They had no role before, but now they'll have a bigger one. The need for a ceasefire is supported by Europe and Ukraine, but it has not yet been agreed upon by either Trump or Russia, so it will not happen. Europe's resilience was shown in its persistent statement that Europe, to be continued, that's sovereignty. Ukraine's borders are not up for debate. And I declare that the summit ended with cautious optimism. As I already told you, well, let's think about it and try to draw our own conclusions. Huge progress was made when Putin agreed that Ukraine should be well armed and protected. The fact that he is ready for Ukraine to receive a status practically like a NATO member, but just called something different, shows that he needs to explain something to his people about how they managed to ensure that NATO would not be on their border, although in reality, of course, it will be. The same countries that are part of NATO members, will be sending their soldiers, just dressed a little differently. So Putin has practically agreed to the current line of demarcation as it stands today, assuming that they would give up a piece of the captured Ukrainian territory in exchange for, so to speak, the territory they would like to capture. It's also clear to Sveta that there's a need to explain to their people that since they included these territories, these regions in the Constitution and declared them Russian, they can't just give them up. So with each passing day, it's actually becoming clearer and clearer to me that Russia, for some internal reasons, has decided to end the war. Whether this is a reaction to threats from Trump with India, China, or some internal problems, or something related to the life or health of Putin himself, of course, we don't know. But if we listen to Putin a year ago and Putin now, we will see a huge difference in his behavior, his walk, and the conclusions he makes publicly. Very serious tasks are set in Peredolinsk. And this is another moment when he has to show himself as a leader. I really hope that God will grant him wisdom. The first thing is that, according to the Constitution of Ukraine, it is impossible to give away any part of Ukraine to anyone. The second challenge is convincing people, after tens of thousands have died, to stop the Russians from advancing further. The fact of handing over certain territories to the Russians, which they managed to capture, will of course shock the people. But Zelensky will have a huge advantage. The United States and Europe have practically accepted Europe into UNATO. Signing a commitment to defend Ukraine in case of an attack is similar to joining. especially since Ukraine will be receiving American weapons partially paid for by Europeans. In addition, the United States is organizing a number of major projects for the extraction and processing of minerals. And since the investments will be in the trillions, America will either bring in its own private army or hire Ukrainian soldiers on contracts to guard these enterprises, and also in support units. Huge investments will flow into Ukraine, even if on a smaller scale, because Ukraine has security guarantees. The combination of security guarantees and the fact that Ukraine needs absolutely everything, because everything is destroyed and Ukraine will have the means to pay for the country's reconstruction, starting with the funds Ukraine will get from developing its own minerals. And the second is private investments and gifts from corporate giants in order to participate in the revival of a country with a population of 40 million people. This is an amazing piece of earnings. A huge post-war problem. The problem of Ukraine is that this state
is unique. Ukraine
is corrupt, and this will not allow Ukraine to become the America of the 21st century. Ukraine will have everything else, including an educated population, natural resources, organizations, and corporations that will want to invest, as well as its geographical location being close to a huge consumer. Well, Europe, yes. So everything that Ukraine can produce, Europe is right next door. On this side, everything will be great. But I'm afraid that 2 years after the end of the war, the Ukrainian population will realize that they have been freed from foreign invaders. It was much easier than breaking free from the local slave owners who decided to call themselves by other names, like officials, servants of the people, oligarchs. I'm afraid that Ukraine will turn into a big camp for very free slaves, where these free slaves will be called just that, free slaves, as opposed to other slaves who are oppressed, where they will be allowed to earn a little and sometimes travel abroad. But it seems, gentlemen, that the conflict with Russia will end rather quickly. After the euphoria, many new but entirely different problems will arise. These will be problems of recovery and construction. I hope this nightmare ends soon.